What is up, everybody? Well, with the release of Evil Dead Rise this past weekend, we now have 5 films in the Evil Dead franchise. One of, if not the most consistent of the horror franchises out there. Love it or hate it, you know what you're getting when you go into an Evil Dead movie, and they pretty much deliver it every time. But with that being said, even though all 5 of these movies are definitely of quality, some of them are celebrated as some of the best horror films of all time, there is differences between them that certainly gives us our preferences. So this is my preference. Let me know your preference down in the comment section below. Kicking things off with number 5 is undoubtedly a very unpopular opinion, but I am one of those rare fools that actually thinks that Evil Dead 2 is the least awesome of this franchise thus far. And the way that I always explain kind of my aversion to this movie that is most people's favorite, for sure, is that I prefer my Evil Dead films whether they are completely horror and gore filled and going for tension, or they go the complete slapstick comedy route. And this movie tries to do both. And that's one of the reasons why most people adore it so much. But for me, it always feels tonally imbalanced. As many times as I've really sat down and tried to watch this movie and tried to have that light bulb go off that just makes me love this on the level of everybody else, every time I revisit this franchise, it always ends up being the one that I've enjoyed the least. Still enjoy it though. It's still very cool, it's still very kooky, the practical effects back then, you know, while I'm not quite as intrigued at how they pulled it off as I am with the original Evil Dead, it's still working within that really low budget, kind of guerrilla style filmmaking that Sam Raimi made famous back in the day. Bruce Campbell is hilarious in this one. This is where he really shined as Ash and all the physical stuff that he would put himself through on screen. Some really insane levels of gore here. This is where the Evil Dead 2 kind of set the tone for the rest of the franchise in one way or another, and so it's still a really fun time. It's a good movie to watch with a group of friends that love this type of stuff, but the other Evil Dead films just deliver what I want from an Evil Dead film a little bit better. Coming in at number 4 for me, as of right now, is going to be Evil Dead Rise, and I gave this a 4 out of 5, so keep that in mind. This is number 4, and it's got a 4 out of 5. This is a movie that I need to rewatch. Over time, just like with the 2013 movie, I might enjoy it more, but this is a movie that delivers a lot of what I wanted, a lot of what I go to an Evil Dead film for. It was a really good experience in the theaters, nice little family dynamic type story to kind of change up the vibe of an Evil Dead film, taking the setting from the cabin in the woods into this high-rise apartment building. I really enjoyed all of those unique aspects. A lot of really good gore, still going for mostly practical stuff, which I enjoy. There's definitely some CG in here, but it's done well. And I think that the central Deadite performance of the mom that's being possessed is one of the better, Deadite performances in this entire franchise. She killed it. Where the movie let me down a little bit is that this is the first time that I actually wanted more of character work, a little bit more of a character dynamic in my Evil Dead film. It's not really something that is a detriment to any of the other 4 films, but because this one's focusing more on the family and younger kids, for my own personal experience, I wanted a bit more attachment to those characters. I wanted to care about these kids more beyond the fact that they're just kids. And I just didn't quite get that. Many people won't care about that. Many people are just going to watch this, love the fact that it's a little bit more brutal and a little bit higher stakes because there are kids involved with the typical Evil Dead carnage, but I think we're at a point where we've gotten enough Evil Dead films like this that go for the zaniness and the overtop gore and isn't really focused on character work and story, that I'm kind of craving one to take that extra effort. And this is the one that I was really craving for it to do that, and it didn't quite get there. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to checking it out again. Coming in at number 3 is going to be the original Evil Dead. And this is a movie that has fluctuated quite a bit in my ranking over my lifetime. This is a movie that I did not like at all when I first watched it as a teenager, probably because I watched this and then Evil Dead 2 back to back, and Evil Dead 2 is kind of like a recap to a certain degree. But over time, the more that I have watched this original film, the more that I have really drawn to it and appreciated so much about that really early Sam Raimi stuff, that ultra low budget and the way that they did the practical effects and some of the stop motion stuff. I just kind of appreciate the filmmaking in this one a bit more. And while this certainly has some of that zany, slapstick, kind of ridiculous over-the-top sense that's trying to go for a bit more of a humorous reaction from the audience, that Evil Dead 2 took to level 11. You still have that here, but I feel like Evil Dead is much more of just a straightforward horror film. This is a movie that's trying to get under your skin in many different ways. And so I appreciate a little bit more of that straightforward direction, as I said earlier. So this is the classic Ash Evil Dead film that I actually prefer. I really enjoy rewatching this one. And I still, to this day, I'm completely baffled and impressed and just mesmerized at the amount of stuff that Sam Raimi was able to do with so little to work with. Coming in at number 2 is going to be Army of Darkness. Now, there was a VHS tape that I used to have as a kid that had 2 different movies on it. I think one of them was an Ernest film, and the other one was this film that I used to rewatch constantly about this man that went back to the medieval times and was fighting a bunch of skeletons and had the whole scene where his face got elongated, and I could never remember what the hell the name of that film was when that VHS tape got lost. And then one day, out of nowhere, I decided to revisit the Evil Dead franchise and go far enough to watch the 3rd film, because I didn't enjoy the first 2 so much back when I was a teenager. And then when I popped on Army of Darkness, I said, son of a bitch, this is that movie that I loved as a kid. And I've loved it ever since. This is one that I have a lot of fun rewatching with my kids. The slapstick humor, which is typically not my style of humor, really works for me in this one, where he's stomping down and steps on the nail, and or when he's, the elongated face and trying to mimic the fact that he forgot the spell, or even the spot where he throws dirt onto the decapitated, evil Ash's head. That shit makes me laugh every single time that I watch it, and that's just one of the best feelings. That classic comedic value that I get out of movies from my childhood that just never get less funny as I grow older. I always have that experience with this. I understand why some people don't prefer this movie because it's more PG-13, not quite as gory. It loses some of those classic Evil Dead elements for much more of a kind of a family-friendly type film, but what it goes for, I think it does extremely well. And so this is probably the movie of this list, despite not being number 1, that I like to rewatch the most.
Hail to the king, baby.
But coming in at number 1 for me is the Fede Alvarez 2013 reboot. I used to call it a remake, but there's a lot of people out there that consider this more of a sequel, and so I'll just be safe and call it a reboot. This is one of those extremely rare movies, count them on one hand, that I have completely shifted my view on. Usually when I see a film, I might, get a little higher on it or get a little low on it with rewatches, but this is one that when I saw it in theaters, I didn't like it at all. I don't know if it was my mood. I don't know if I was just expecting something different. I don't know if all the overhype with the marketing, even the poster, this is the most terrifying film you'll ever see. I don't know if that set me up with the wrong expectations, but I went to see this with my parents, walked out, didn't care for it at all. Fast forward maybe 2-3 years, and the Blu-ray was cheap, so I picked it up. I was going to rewatch the Evil Dead franchise, and when I got to this one, I was shocked, completely floored at how much I loved it. And I was just sitting there thinking, what the fuck was wrong with me when I watched this the first time? Is this a totally different movie? This is fucking awesome. The approach that Fede Alvarez took in this with, getting rid of some of the comedic elements, getting rid of the more slapstick side of things, and just going full bore with the horror, with the gore, with the self-mutilation, with the tension, and created an Evil Dead film that just has absolute gigantic balls. That, to me, is the tone that I prefer most with an Evil Dead film. And for whatever reason, because of the setup in this one, with Mia being a drug addict trying to detox and all of her friends staying in the cabin with them, which is a genius way to get rid of that whole question of why they don't leave the cabin and why they don't believe that she's possessed because she's going through withdrawal. Because that setup was captivating enough for me, I didn't really need all of the extra character dynamic that I certainly missed with Evil Dead Rise. And so this movie at first just kind of became an experience of, okay, who's going to be the Ash character? Who's going to survive till the end? And it was such an awesome journey to watch Mia, who some days I might even like more than Ash Williams. I don't know how controversial that is, but seeing her go through this massive character arc to where she descends into madness and turns into a deadite and is self-mutilating and cutting her tongue and everything, and then loops back around to become the hero by the end of it and rips her fucking arm off and shoves the chainsaw down the throat of the demon. Like, that whole raining blood sequence is like the most metal thing I've ever seen in a horror film. So this is a movie that I have very little to anything negative to say about it. It just works for me. Every time I rewatch it, I get so excited about just how cool it is. And it's something that, as much as I loved Evil Dead Rise and I was really excited for it, there was always this bit of disappointment that we're not going to get a follow-up with Mia. And I still hold hope that maybe one day that we will, because this is absolutely, without a doubt, my #1 Evil Dead film. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my playlist up here of all of my Evil Dead reviews if you want my more in-depth thoughts on these 5 films. Thank you for watching. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. Movie season, summer movie season, about ready to kick off in full force, so be sure to stick around. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.